doesn't matter what people are going through right now. And I know there are people out there that are hurting and struggling and thinking this is it. Someone just emailed me the other day and said they feel like suicide and giving up. I know I've been through times when I felt like that, when I felt like I can't take any more. And, you know, I believe that the universe is always there ready to catch us. You know, and often it's painful because we're going to have to come up against things that really challenge our idea of the world and who we are and our place in it.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Yeah, the last 5-6 years have been incredible. Really
Beautiful.
amazing. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about it. Okay, we are off and running. Hello and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. As always, a delight to be with you all again. And remember, if you enjoy the conversations, please share them with your friends and like and subscribe to whatever platform you're listening to, and spread the love. Now, I've got a beautiful friend. I have to call you friend. I feel like we're friends. We don't really know each other that well, but we're friends. Friend on today called Janine Shepherd. Welcome to the
Welcome. It's great to connect with you again or reconnect.
I know. So Janine and I had a chat for Sydney Radio 2012, so 8 years ago now. She has an amazing story. The reason I'm doing this with you today is one of my Inner Sanctum tribe, posted your TED Talk in our group and said, "Oh my God, look at this amazing woman." And I'm like, "Oh, I know that amazing woman. I must catch up with you and see what you've been doing." Because 2012 was a different world. Things were happening. But
that was when I gave my TED Talk.
And that was when you gave your TED Talk, in the States, which kind of went viral. It's an amazing TED Talk, and I think it's changed people's lives all over the world. But people that haven't heard your story will have to go over your story. Let me read your bio.
You don't have to read it all word for word, just, you know.
I will, I do. The other thing is, what does CSP stand for?
Oh, Certified Speaking Professional.
There you go. So that's what Janine. Janine is a certified speaking professional, was a former Australian champion skier, headed to the Calgary Winter Olympics in 1988. During a routine bike ride for her training, Janine was the victim of a horrific car accident, suffering multiple threatening injuries that would see her in hospital in a full body cast. After almost 6 months in hospital and struggling to rehabilitate with permanent disabilities, Janine didn't learn to walk, she learned to fly, literally. Starting flight training in a plaster body cast, she ultimately attained her commercial pilot rating and even taught aerobatics. You didn't teach that when you're in a cast though, did you? Aerobatics?
No, I don't think anyone would have got in the aeroplane with me if I had a body cast on at that stage.
Told it was unlikely that you would ever have children. She's the proud mother of 3. And today Janine is an internationally renowned speaker and author of 6 best-selling books. Her inspired TED Talk, A Broken Body Isn't a Broken Person, has seen about over 1.5 million views, probably more than that now. And you've been featured on Australian 60 Minutes, This Is Your Life, and recognised in your country in Australia's highest honour, the Order of Australia. You've also named the Architect of Change by Maria Shriver. That was interesting. When did that happen?
Oh, a couple of years ago. Yeah.
And was named as one of the most 10 outstanding young people of the world. Janine is an ambassador for Red Bull Wings for Life and also Spinal Cure Australia. Your life story has currently been adapted into a Hollywood movie. Oh, it's being adapted into a Hollywood, but it's already been in a movie with...
Well, many years ago was in Australia, but now it's been picked up in Hollywood, and we have 3 big producers working on it and a screenwriter, and I'm pretty excited about that.
So they're going to do it all again.
This is Hollywood.
This is Hollywood.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got a few books out, but you were just saying that the book that you want people to get is, and I'm just looking for it now, what's it called?
Defiant.
Defiant. So that's the book you want people to get. And you said to me before I turned the recording on that you've basically put most of your work and all your other books into that one book. So if people get that one book, they'll really get the gist of all the other books, right? Because
Yes,
you've
that's
written
right.
about 6 books.
Yeah, 6.
And there's another book out which had only just come out when I spoke to you back in 2012 called The Book of I've lost it now. Acceptance.
Gift of Acceptance.
Gift of Acceptance, which was beautiful. All right, for people that don't know your story, let's go over it briefly. And because you had an NDE, you had a near-death experience during the accident, didn't you?
I call it a DE.
A DE,
I call it a death
experience.
Yeah, it's not near death, it's death. So yeah, I had an experience. I had an out-of-body experience, and it's something I don't talk about very much because I have this, the perspective is I didn't come back to teach people about the afterlife. I came back to teach people how to live in this life.
Well, it's interesting because what we teach on this show here is how to teach the perspective of the afterlife while we're having a physical life. And that's why I had put so many NDE people on my show. And I have to say, I put a book out a couple of years ago called Awakened by Death, because what I found podcasting over the years is that when I put information out about NDEs or the afterlife, it gets the most views. So people are seeking what happens when you die. It's a huge question. Because you know what? We're all going to die. No one's getting out of here alive.
That's right. But my take on that is, look, worry about this life. Worry about what you do here. We're so busy wanting to get out of this life, thinking that there's something better out there. We sort of forget that this is what counts. We're here to make these lessons count. And that to me is why I came back, to show people how to live, how to embrace the defiant human spirit here in this life, to bring heaven to earth, so to speak. Yeah.
But we have to know what heaven's like in order to bring heaven to earth. So tell us the story. What happened?
Well, you can't really understand it, vicariously through another person, I guess. But we've all been there. We just don't remember. So in that sense, look, all I can say is it was a very personal experience. I wasn't on my own. I was guided through the experience. And the biggest takeaway for me is that, I came, having been an elite athlete, it was all about my body. That's how I define myself. That's how I put myself out in the world. So, the accident, of course, I'm a paraplegic. I'm a walking paraplegic now. Technically, they sort of say partial paraplegic, walking paraplegic, but I am a woman with a disability. And so, when I was going through those first 10 days, making the decision whether I would come back to my body or not, I knew that I was coming back to a body that was broken. And I also didn't want to come back. I was really aware that it was my choice to come back. I didn't have to, but I did. And so coming back into a body that was broken as an athlete, not to be able to do the things I did before, was very confusing. And there was a lot of anger around that too. And I realized, it took me a long time to realize I came back because this was the greatest opportunity. The one thing that was going to wake me up to who I was and who I wasn't was to lose the thing that I thought defined who I was, and that was my body. And of course, yes, my TED Talk is called A Broken Body Isn't a Broken Person, but the original title of my TED Talk was You're Not Your Body.
Why did you change it? Or why did they change it?
Because they put it onto TED.com, and I guess they thought it was a little esoteric. They wanted to change it to something that probably was more easily tapped into by the collective. So they changed, mainstream. They changed the title, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, the talk, it's been life-changing for me as well, because I've had so much incredible feedback, and of course, picked up in America, and the book published in America, the movie deal, and everything else. It's been quite an extraordinary experience.
Darling one, it's been a journey. I remember when we met basically on the telephone for radio, and then we got on, we were chatting so much after the show that I met you in Bowral, because you were living down in Bowral then, and I think my brother was living down there too. Anyway, and we had a coffee, and you were all set to sort of fly to the, fly to leave Australia and sort of conquer the world stage and spread the love, share the message. And I remember saying to you on the show, I'll be seeing you on Oprah. Oprah doesn't do her show anymore, but she still does. Or Ellen. Have any of those people picked you up?
Not yet, but
Not yet.
As I said, it's coming to America wasn't really something that I thought I would do. It was a call from the universe. This is what I was meant to do. And the reason I came to America was that after my TED talk, I received many emails from all around the world, and one in particular was from a man in India who wrote to me and said, I've had an ailment for 19 years. I was considering suicide, and I saw your talk, and my life starts now. Pray for me. And I thought, this is it. Here I was ready to sort of wind down my speaking. I'd had so much more than just my accident. My marriage had broken down. I was a single mum for 10 years with a disability. I lost my house because of the GFC, the financial crisis. And there were every time I was thinking, why is this happening? What's going on here? And I've always been strengthened by this sort of resolve and belief that, I came here and back to my body to show other people how to live and how to live fully and fearlessly. And of course, after that email, I packed up everything, moved to America, not knowing anyone, not having any work, not knowing what am I doing. And, as it turns out, it's been an extraordinary 5-6 years here, and life could not be any different. I thought I was coming for a year, by the way.
Okay. Oh, that email sounds amazing.
It was incredible.
So tell us what's been happening.
Well, I got a book deal. I didn't have any work at the time, and of course, I ended up meeting my soulmate, and we have been married now for quite a few years. We actually got married a couple of years ago in Kenya.
Okay, so I want to hear all the details, please. Come on.
Yeah, so where
did you meet him? What were you doing?
He actually wrote me an email when I was in Australia. He was writing a documentary on a boy with a disability, and he'd written to me to say, would you mind if we interviewed you for this documentary? And he signed off blue skies and tailwinds, and I thought, oh, maybe he's a pilot. And of course he is, and lives in Wyoming, where I am now. It's crazy. I didn't even know where that was. And I just had this feeling. I knew in my heart something special is happening here. Mm-hmm. And, I'd been single for 10 years, raising 3 kids. So I came to America. So I wrote back. We had a couple of emails, and that was it, because I was in Australia, not planning at that point to move. And as things unfolded, I ended up moving and living in California in a little sort of wooden cabin with nothing, a bed, a table. I'd lost everything. I thought, what is happening in my life? Again, just really surrendering and trusting that it was going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And then one day I opened my computer, and there was this email, and it said, yikes, it's been 2 years since we've connected. And I thought, oh yeah, that's the blue skies and tailwinds guy. And I'm going to fast forward, but we ended up, I knew this was something happening. This was something special. And we did end up meeting, and of course fell in love, and had this incredibly deep soul connection that I'd never had with anyone before. It was things in our life that were, our paths were going in and out, and sort of similarities in everything about us, really. We're like yin and yang. And of course we're both pilots, and there was this love of flying as well. So a couple of years ago, we were in Africa, and David was teaching flying over there we were at a elephant safari camp. Wow. And he planned a surprise wedding. Crazy.
In Africa?
Yes, in Kenya. We got married in a riverbed by Samburu warriors. So it's been crazy. I know. And he's a writer as well. We're both writers. We're both pilots. It's just a very, very evolved relationship, and something that it had been an intention that I wanted to manifest. And of course it happened. So it's been a blessing. Yeah.
Beautiful. So life over the last 5 years has been a lot calmer than all the other years prior.
Well, in some ways I've also had many challenges, living with disability. I've had a couple of years of extreme and chronic pain. I've always had physical pain, but a couple of years ago it just got, to the point where I thought, oh, this is what's happening. And anyway, that took a long time. I found a way through that. I've always found that, every problem has a lifespan, and, I adjusted. David he was on a ketogenic diet at the time, and I learned about that. He's actually a chemical engineer. That's what he trained as. So he knows a lot about chemistry and diet. So I started a low-carb diet, and that, really helped everything. I'm not in chronic pain anymore, and that's been extraordinary. That, again, has been another extraordinary part of my journey. Wow. And all of this leads me to, the teachings of what I'm doing at the moment. So you probably don't know this, even Karen, but my background before my accident is, I was studying to be an exercise physiologist. So my background is in sports science and education. And really, I've spent the entire time since my accident asking myself, how have I done what I've done? And how can I help other people overcome adversity, setback, loss, all the things that we go through? So I've put all of that teaching into I created the School for Resilience. And we're just about to launch our first course, which has taken years. It's called Build Your Unshakable Core. And they're unique teachings that, based on, what we call 5 foundation and 12 key steps, everything from, scientific principles to spiritual principles of things like acceptance, forgiveness, compassion, gratitude, just to help people, because I realize that, let's face it, life is tough. Life is uncertain, and we need a certain set of tools to get through these, to handle the curveballs that come our way.
Absolutely. You're somebody that sort of straddling the worlds. Because you speak about resilience and success, you get a lot of people that want to talk to you about, how do we achieve and become successful and resilient in life? And yet you're also bringing that spiritual message of, bringing heaven to earth. How do you do that? I'd like to think, because I'm very esoteric, as you say, the conversations we have is about our multidimensionalism, spirit guides, psychic ability, deliberate creation, heaven and all the different realms, like all that stuff. So I'm very entrenched in the esoteric conversation. Once I came off community radio, I'm like, yay, I'm just going to talk about what I want to talk about. I'm not going to pander to a mainstream audience, that the audience can find me instead of me reaching out to find the audience. But you're straddling these worlds. How do people kind of digest your spiritual principles, or do you just keep it very digestible in your vernacular?
Well, it depends on, if I'm standing on a stage speaking to, IBM or Google or Facebook, although I'm very open and very honest, and it's very much like my TED Talk. Like, I'm not standing on stage telling people you can do whatever you want, but in a way we can. What I'm saying is, life is tough. But when we change our perspective and we realize that life is tough, well, then we can roll up our sleeves and get on with solving our problems. So I give people very practical tools to deal with the challenges in life. I'm very much into living a values-based life. We all need goals, but what we need to do is sort out what our core values are and align our goals with our values. I teach people a lot of the skills and the tools that I have from my background. I'm a positive psychology coach. I'm very much into neuroplasticity and neuroscience and those sort of things. So I try to break those down into really tangible, or distill those key teachings into lessons and tools that people can use every day in their life. And, I have a lot of practices in my life, from mindfulness practices to meditation practices to, moving my body, because I'm a woman with disability, so I need to move my body. There's, life's a challenge. We need lots of tools in our resilience toolkit. And I think resilience is probably the most important skill we need, because life is tough. And resilience isn't, I'm going to get everything I want in life, but in a funny sort of a twist, it's, I want everything that I get, because I know I can handle it. So it's about realizing that we all have everything we need inside us to handle whatever curveballs come our way.
Well, your story, even though we haven't really gone over it, I guess people will just have to wait for the movie to come out or read the book.
Yeah.
Your story is horrific because when you smashed yourself up, you were well and truly broken. So here you are, they called you Janine the Machine. You were this powerhouse athlete heading to the 1988 Winter Olympics, unbelievable skier and honor training, and smashed to pieces by, so you're on a bike and a truck hit you, didn't it? A truck?
Yeah. And so, I'd been an athlete my entire life. And, since I was 6 or 7, I started with track and field. And, it sort of seemed unlikely for an Australian to be a skier, although we know now that Australians are just sports mad and we're great at winter sports. So, I really wanted to do something that no one else had done before. And I'd had incredible opportunities. I'd been invited to train with the Canadian ski team. And, the stars were aligning. And, of course, when that truck ran me over, it changed everything in my life. I broke my neck and my back in 6 places, 5 ribs on my left side, my right arm, bones in my feet, head injuries, internal injuries, massive blood loss. I lost 5 liters of blood, which is all someone my size would hold. And as you know from, if you watch my TED Talk, when the helicopter arrived at the hospital in Sydney, my blood pressure was 40 over nothing. So, I'm not meant to be here. That it was just against all odds that I even survived. And in a funny way, I was so fit. I'd been tested at the Institute of Sport in Canberra. That, I had the highest VO2 max of any female that they'd tested there. I sort of feel like if I hadn't been that fit, well, I wouldn't have survived. My body wouldn't have coped. So I feel in a way that all the training I did in my life was to survive that accident.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you say you wanted to call the talk, I'm Not My Body. If we're not our body, then who are we? Like, did you find that out when you were on the other side, like because you were not in your body and there you are? Like, well, here I am. I'm not in my body and here I am. So I'm obviously not my body.
I think, I sat down with the curator of TEDx Kansas City, and he said, look, it's such an incredible story, but, a TED Talk's one idea worth sharing. You're not there to tell a whole story. What's your one idea? And when I was sitting with Mike Lundgren at Sydney Airport and he was interviewing me for the TED Talk, he said, what's your one idea? And I said, well, I'm not my body. He goes, now that's a TED Talk. And in Defiant, I actually write about the whole TED journey as well, which a lot of people in Australia, might know about my accident and the early parts of my life. But there's so much more to my story that the people are unaware of. And so I think for me, understanding that was coming home from hospital in a wheelchair, a plaster body cast, having to learn to self-catheter and, having a body, I had no feeling from the waist down and feeling ashamed of my body, feeling I hated my body. I just wanted to put my running shoes on and run out the door. And here I was with a body that didn't function. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I had no feeling. I was told in no uncertain terms by a doctor that didn't have much, empathy, you'll never have the big O again.
Yeah.
So, I was told I wouldn't be able to have a sex life. I wouldn't be able to have children. I mean, it was like, could it get any worse? And, I wanted to die. I didn't want to be there. It was incredibly painful. And I remember, even now, it makes me, it really affects me. I feel this, sort of welling up inside me of the pain of that time. I was 24, I had everything going for me, and suddenly I'm a disabled girl, and my life's been taken from me from one speeding driver. And there was one night in particular when, I thought, I don't want to be here. And I remember, my whole body was covered in a plaster cast. And I remember pulling myself from my bed falling onto the floor in my bedroom on my knees and just saying, God, you show me a way out of this or show me a way through it, because I can't do this, And it was a moment of surrender that I just didn't know what else to do. And I think that's what I was being asked to do, to let go. Let go of who you think you are. Let go of that life. That is not your life now. Opportunities are awaiting you. Possibilities are awaiting for you, but they're not going to show themselves unless you let go. And that's what I did. And I just remember sobbing in my room and in anguish. I mean, that was my dark night of the soul. That was my rock bottom. And I know everyone out there is listening. I'm sure we've all had them, you know. And I always say that rock bottom is a gift, because it doesn't just show you who you are, it shows you who you're not. I'm not my body.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I let go of that night, letting go and surrendering, that my life changed. You know, it was not long after that I was, you know, outside in my wheelchair and an airplane flew over, and I thought, I'd never even thought about flying in my life, you know, and suddenly it was like, oh, well, maybe I can fly. And it was ridiculous, unlikely. It was, you know, I was a disabled woman, a girl, you know, and that moment changed my life. And, you know, I always say that flying saved me.
Yeah. Yes. Do you do a lot of flying with David?
We do, not so much at the moment, obviously, but we both commercial pilots and flying instructors, so we love to go flying. And, you know, I don't fly as much now because, you know, I'm so busy doing other things. But flying is, you know, it's funny. People often ask me, why flying? Why did you choose flying? And I say, I didn't. Flying chose me.
Yeah.
You know, because
that's so beautiful.
Magical. It's magical. Flying is magical, and it's a metaphor for life. You know, it's a metaphor for freedom. And, you know, after lying paralyzed in a spinal ward, you know, it was, you know, completely something so opposite to being paralyzed. It was complete and utter freedom.
You know, last time we spoke about Richard Bach, who you and I both adore. The author Richard Bach, who I must have spoken to him before I spoke to you, or I had him on radio, and he had a light plane accident 2 weeks after I spoke to him on radio, and had his own near-death experience, because he said to me that he had a wall full of books on near-death experiences, and then 2 weeks after that conversation he has his own. I've reached out to him a couple of times since then, must have been 8 years ago, and said, are you ready to talk again? And he's gone, no. Maybe one day before he leaves the planet. But flying, look, I think, just going back to letting go, I think that's so key, because during this time of COVID, there are so many of us that are having to let go of who we thought we are, because so many people have lost their jobs, like millions and millions and millions of people have lost their jobs. And so they're, you know, because they've shut down everything, which I think is probably, you know, that's a bigger story than the sickness story or the virus story. Apart from the mainstream media, I don't know anyone that's, you know, actually been sick or had the virus. But the story really is the shift in our world, and people being asked to let go of an old way of who they thought they were,
and who we think we are in the world.
Who we think we are in the world, like we are not our jobs or our body or our careers or our relationships. So if we are not, who do you think we are?
We are the defiant human spirit.
The defiant human spirit.
And, you know, the funny thing is, when I decided to call my book Defiant, actually it was given to me by Bruna Papandrea. She's an Australian producer, and she said, you know what, I had to find a name for my new book, and she said Defiant, because you're defiant. And I thought, oh well, I love that. And then you know, just after that, I was contacted by the Viktor Frankl Institute, who wrote to me to say, we're having a big conference in Russia, and we want to show your TED Talk. And the title of the conference, or the piece that they wanted to, you know, showcase my story, was The Defiant Human Spirit. And I thought, and I just picked the name Defiant, and I thought, again, this happens to me all the time. These things just happen. And I'm like, thank you, universe. And of course, Viktor Frankl actually talks about the defiant human spirit, and it's the force in us. And in my TED talk, I talk about this pilot light that was burning inside me, the one that kept me going to the flying school, even though I was disabled, even though I was using a catheter, even though there were guys there flying who were laughing at me and thinking she'll never do it. It's that force inside us that keeps us moving forward. That is the defiant human spirit. That's when we listen to that inner voice. That's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Beautiful.
doesn't matter what people are going through right now. And I know there are people out there that are hurting and struggling and thinking this is it. Someone just emailed me the other day and said they feel like suicide and giving up. I know I've been through times when I felt like that, when I felt like I can't take any more. And, I believe that the universe is always there ready to catch us. And often it's painful because we're going to have to come up against things that really challenge our idea of the world and who we are and our place in it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wow, absolutely. Your story reminds me, after I spoke to you in 2012, I spoke to another woman, I can't remember when, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, Nancy Rhines, who was a scientist and an atheist.
Oh, right, interesting.
A staunch atheist. And she was on a bike and she was hit by a small truck, like a ute, and dragged under the truck. And like you, her story is quite similar. Like you, she was broken. I think she said she broke 25 bones in her body multiply, like she was just smashed to smithereens. And like you, her healing was really, like when she came out of the hospital, her healing was really speedy. But the part of her story that was so fascinating was that she found herself in this heavenly realm speaking to a spirit guide who called herself Mary. And everyone says, was it Mother Mary? Was it Mary Magdalene? She said it was a spirit guide, and she gave herself the name of Mary. And she said to Nancy, I want you to tell people about heaven. I want you to go back and tell people, I'm going to teach you. And I want you to go back. And here's an atheist that comes out of this new experience that now has to teach people about heaven. It was a complete 180-degree shift for her. Did something like that happen to you when you were on the other side as well?
Well, I had an experience that, when I got home from hospital, I read a lot of books on NDEs because I couldn't reconcile my experience with other people's. I didn't go down a tunnel. Right. I didn't see the white light. I remember I went to a medium, and I remember saying to someone that I'd gone to a lot, and I remember saying, well, why didn't I go down the tunnel? And funnily enough, she goes, because you were too impatient. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty much me. So I went straight to the Hall of Records. Right. And in that room, I was with 3 beings. And as I said, I find this very difficult sometimes to talk about because, for fear of sounding like a bit of a nutcase. But, one of those beings, they were very high order beings. And they were in black, which always confused me too, until I realized that was actually symbolic of, where I was. And I was in a room that was like a library, books all around me, and a big table. I remember being walked over to this table and looking in this table. And when I looked in this sort of glass table, I could see my life if I went back to my body. So it was like projecting the future. And what I was looking at was a broken body and disability. And so I was given a choice. Do you want to go back or do you want to stay? And I wanted to stay. I didn't want to go back to that broken body. But I did, and which was confusing at first. And I realized that during that time when I was having these experiences, my parents were sitting by my bed in intensive care, holding my hand and praying for me. I remember my dad, was just holding my hand. And I really think that was my lifeline. There were so many people willing me to come back to my body. And my awareness was that I have a choice. They said to me, it's your choice. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really important word to me because I realized that I had a choice to come back. Mm-hmm. And we all have a choice. Mm-hmm. Life is about choice. Mm-hmm. And Carolyn Mace, the spiritual teacher, says, choice is our greatest power. Absolutely. It's our superpower, really. Because first, even greater than love, because first we have to choose to
Absolutely.
love.
Mm-hmm.
So, I very much feel that life is a choice. It's very aligned with everything about my life and everything that I teach, because we have a choice how we see this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We have a choice how we face all of the challenges and obstacles in my life. Everything's a story. We have a choice in what story we want to create.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back to my body and I had a choice. I wasn't a person with a disability. I was a person with opportunities. This wasn't happening to me. This was happening for me. So, all of those things, I got to create the story of my life, one that was uplifting and inspiring. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned that from that time out of my body. This is your choice. So, I didn't have the same NDE as other people. I didn't see the white light. As I said, I was too impatient. Straight to the Hall of Records.
Well, I have to tell you, Janine, most of the people I've had on the show that have had NDEs don't do the white light thing either. There's something about the white light thing that's a different... Look, it depends on the consciousness in which you leave this earth, what you will experience. So, the white light thing is kind of like giving us an experience of traveling from one realm to the next. It's like being on an aeroplane and traveling. It's like gives us that experience of moving, whereas heaven and earth is one space. It's just a different octave of frequency, really. And so the true reality is that we don't go anywhere. We just shift vibration and we're there. So we can do that in meditation, or we can do that by being hit by a truck or leaving our body, and so it's a different story, the white light thing. And it's funny that most of the people I've spoken to don't have the white light tunnel. It's just like they can sometimes have that experience of being out of the body and looking down on the body, but mostly it's just like in your body 1 minute, talking to beings on the other side the next. Which I think is probably what happened to you, right?
Yeah. Because when looking back, and there was, I know that as a teenager, I had a lot of out of body experiences.
Right.
That were inexplicable,
Right.
waking up and being somewhere in the middle of the night, not being home in bed, sort of astral travel type of experiences. So I think I've had this sort of connection my entire life. And,
Right.
Ever since my accident, I've had many, many experiences of, sort of inexplicable but magical experiences. After my accident, when I was home, I went through a series of nightmares, and I used to have this one nightmare was, I was falling and I'd just wake up all the time just before I'd hit the ground. And I remember waking up once on one experience, sort of waking up and looking at the end of my bed, and there was an angel at the end of my bed, and the message was, you're okay, we're looking after you. And, then I went through a series of dreams where I had this hands reaching into my chest and pulling out my heart. And the message was, it's this sort of heart surgery, where we're transforming your heart for a different life, where my life before the accident was all about me. I was an athlete. That's what, it's me. And then the transformation came, that I realized that my life was not about me. It was all about everybody else. And that's one of the many lessons, from my TED Talk, the story of the straws. And that's what we're all going through now, this great shift in consciousness where, I don't know how we're going to come out of this, but I hope that it's going to be a kinder and more compassionate world. I hope it's going to be a world where people realize that we are so connected. We all need each other. And I think that's such an important message. It's been, what I've lived through my entire life ever since, that fateful day.
As you're speaking, I've got, I have a friend that died. When did she die? Anyway, she's here. I don't know why she's here, but she's here listening to you, which is really, I haven't thought about her for ages, but here she is. Beautiful. I'll have a chat with her after I hang up with you. It's interesting why she's here. I haven't seen her for ages.
How did she die? How did she pass?
She killed herself. But she had she wasn't an athlete, but she had, anyway, she's just listening to her message.
Because she knows, it's painful. Life is incredibly painful, but it's also rich. It's both. It's the paradox of life, and And I know that there are a lot of people thinking of that right now. Somebody just emailed me, as I said the other day. And, I just hope that we can, that the people in, leadership roles right now do the right thing, because we need to reach out and help the people that need help right now.
Well, like the thing about leadership roles, there are some that are not, and there are some that are, and it's all perfect, really. I think that, the crux of your message is it's not about me, it's about we. And as we shift into a new reality, into the, fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, that's really where we're going consciously, is that we've got to stop thinking about what's in it for me, service to self, and start thinking about what can I, how can I serve others.
And this is time for us, this is time for female energy to come in. We have Jacinda Ardern, in New Zealand, leading that country, who is just a wonderful leader. This is a time for, we need to embrace female energy right now. And we need more women in leadership roles to bring that into the world.
Who was I speaking to recently? I can't remember who. I think it was Michael Tamura. And he said that the person that'll change the political landscape of the states will be a woman, the person that gets into power. So I don't know who that was. I don't think he knew who that was either. And I'm like, yes. I think he said that in our Inner Sanctum group. And we've got a lot of women in the group, and we all went, yes.
Well, wouldn't we love it? Wouldn't we love Michelle Obama to stand? But, she's not going to. But, yeah, it's, we need
Michelle. Yeah. Women's empowerment. So you said you're doing some work with women. Do you want to talk about that quickly?
Well, yeah. I mean, I just went to Istanbul before the lockdown, spoke for a UN Women event for International Women's Day, and I've got 3 children. They said I wouldn't have any. I've got 2 very strong girls. I've got a son and 2 girls, and I want to be able to lend my voice to, help the, this pandemic that's going on around the world. The women's struggle around the world, which is prolific. Women's rights are human rights, and we need to end violence against women. We need to end poverty for women. We need women to be educated. And I'm sort of, this is my calling now. This is the next step, is to sort of say, okay, universe, where do you need me to go in this respect? How do I help women?
So that's the plan, to help impoverished or women that are downtrodden women. What was I going to say? So the kids, but it's still in Australia?
Yeah, I've got 3 amazing kids. I've got Annabelle's, she worked at Google, studied psychology. She created a STEM, for game and book for young girls, worked at a neuroscience lab. So she's a scientist. I've got Charlotte, who's 25, and she's a doctor in Bendigo. She's worked an emergency room registrar down there, working, to stem COVID, which of course, Australia's done so well with. And my son is finishing his last year in engineering. So they're all in the sciences.
Oh, wow. And do you think that was because of your story? They were influenced because of your story?
I think they've all, in somehow, particularly Charlotte, I think she went into medicine because she has a mum with a disability.
Right.
Yeah. They're very empathic. Caring children. They understand, the story. My story, of course, has affected them because they've grown up with it.
Yeah.
And they've seen me. They're very resilient. They've seen their mum fall down and get up so many times that it's sort of second nature for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, let's hope they're a part of the third wave. I had a conversation with Susie Hansen, who is a dual soul. She's like an ET soul and human soul. And she talked about the 3 waves of volunteers that came to Earth to be a part of the shift. And she said the third wavers are people that don't necessarily have conversations about spirituality. They seem to be awake but asleep. And she said that when the shift hits the fan, my words, not hers, but like when we go through this extraordinary times where we're shifting human consciousness, and the literal shift hits the fan, which is kind of what we're going through now, these third wavers will awaken to their mission here on Earth without having to have an NDE, mind you, which I find, because we can awaken softly or we can awaken abruptly. I think that you awoke abruptly, but they'll awaken and they'll know exactly what to do. And you talked about Jacinta, she's one of them. Like, they put themselves in places of science, as doctors, as leaders, as politicians, as mums, as dads, but in very mainstream worlds. They're not in the sort of woo-woo world, I suppose, but they have that consciousness. And when the shift hits the fan, they're like, I know exactly what to do. And so maybe your kids are like part of the third wave.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, they're young adults making their way in the world, and I'm incredibly proud of them and for the work they're doing. Yeah.
Oh, darling one, it's been absolutely beautiful to
Thank
catch up with you again. Is there any
too.
last things you want to say before we go?
No. Well, of course, if anyone out there is struggling right now, please go to my website. I've got a lot of free things there that they can use. There's a quiz, a resilience quiz, some free tools. Of course, the course we're launching, which we're launching at a price which doesn't even cover the cost of hosting it. And if anyone does want to come, I'd love to give you a code that you can offer to your people so they can get 20% off the course. And we're also going to offer them 2 for 1. So basically, if they bring a friend along, it's going to cost them $45 or something just to do this 6-week course.
Wow.
So they can
great.
Yeah, as I said, it's I just want this teaching to be available. So we're making it as available and accessible as we can. And of course, I'll also send you a SoundCloud recording that people can access right now, which is Resilience in Uncertain Times, and that will give people an overview of the teaching as well.
Great. Well, I'll have all that on my website. I won't put it on the YouTube or SoundCloud thing. I'll put all the links and everything on my website. So if you want those links and the codes and everything, and also I'll put the affiliate link to Janine's books on the website as well, and you can grab the book. And sounds wonderful. I know that I can hear people saying, yep, I'm going to sign up for that for sure. I know some of my tribe will definitely sign up for it, especially I think it was Sarah that told me about you. I think from our little Inner Sanctum tribe, she was the one that said, oh, look at this amazing woman. And I'm like, oh, Janine, she is an amazing woman. You are an amazing woman.
I would welcome, as I said, it's tough times, my experience, not just, my study in sports science, neuroscience, neuroplasticity, positive psychology, but really my personal experience of how did I do what I've done, and how can I help other people? So it's going to be a great journey. I'm really excited to share that with people and welcome them along and just help them with, whatever I always say the course is how to build your unshakable core so you can handle anything the universe throws at you.
Absolutely. Well, darling one, thank you again for opening up about your death experience, because I know that you're sort of reluctant to do that because you don't want to seem too woo-woo, but you're speaking to a woo-woo audience.
Yeah, well,
woo-woo has to come out of the closet.
That's right. We'll come out of the closet. I like it.
Okay. This is a time where we have to own our woo-woo and say, yep, I talked to angels. I spoke to Jesus on the other side. I spoke to, this is a time where we have to be out of everything is being exposed, the corruption, but the beauty and the divine as well.
Absolutely. So, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And lots of love to everybody out there. And just remember that we are in this together and you're not alone.
How wonderful it was to catch up with Janine. She was just telling me that she's in the Rocky Mountains in Wyoming, near Montana. I really don't know anything about the States, but surrounded by mountains, and it sounds beautiful. She's got these little cabins, and it was so lovely to catch up with her. So since I spoke to her last, she's met the man of her dream. She's living in another country. She's, got married in Africa. Wow. How magical life can be. Even after she says life's tough, life can be tough, but life can also be magical. I really believe that life does not have to be so tough. Like Janine's my age, we're the same age, late 50s. And I think for our generation, the wake-up process was a tough process. And, we do teach resilience, but I think for the younger generations, they're waking up so much easier. They're having ayahuasca ceremonies, getting together and loving each other and having these epiphanies, and it's just an easier ride for them in their awakening process, in their activation process, in their remembering why they're here on earth. We come into these beautiful flesh suits, these beautiful human forms, and we get taught that it's all about us, right? What are you going to do when you wake up? What are you going to be when you grow up? And And we're taught to focus purely on our wants and our needs. And then we wake up to, actually, maybe I'm here not just for me and what my ego wants. Maybe I'm here to serve humanity. And I hope that that can be a gentler ride for most people. But, you know, the thing about having traumatic wake-up journeys is that it makes for a unbelievable story to help others wake up from their drama, and to not see the drama as happening to them, but happening for them. So, yeah, there's many people like Janine and Nancy who have had these terrible, horrific car accidents, and seeing that, you know, life, it can be beautiful even in its tragedy. Last time I spoke to Janine, I remember the last thing she said was, I said, "What was your last message?" And she said, "Learn to love the hills." She said when she was training as an athlete, and she'd be going up the hills, and her body would be in pain and aching. She was saying that, you know, what I've learned through my trauma is to learn to love the traumatic times, learn to love the hills. So we're going through that at the moment, you know, with COVID. A bit of a hill to climb, a bit of a mountain to overcome. Can we love it? Can we learn to love it? Beautiful. Amazing, amazing woman. All right, so who's coming up next? Belinda Womack is coming into the Inner Sanctum in June. She's our guest teacher around mid-June, I think it is. I have to have a look at the date. So if you want to meet Belinda, she channels the 12 archangels. She's really quite extraordinary. Quite extraordinary is Belinda Womack. Yeah, I'd love you to join us. Just jump online and sign up. The Inner Sanctum, karenswain.com/the Inner Sanctum. And yes, and I'm online every week teaching at the moment, and we're getting, you know, good crowds. So I hope you can join us in the Inner Sanctum, or have a private session if you're not someone for crowds or groups. I've got people that have been seeing me for years, and I'm like, why don't you join the group? You know, it's a lot cheaper than having private sessions. They go, nope, I just want you all to myself. And I'm like, okay. I like the groups, I really do. But one-on-ones are good too. And who's coming up on the show? I'm not sure. Got an angel lady coming up next week. Athenra. I don't know if I spelled that wrong or if I'm saying that wrong. I think I talked about that last. And Bill Bennett's coming back the week after that. So Bill Bennett is he made the movie PGS, Your Personal Guidance System. Intuition is Your Personal Guidance System, which is a beautiful documentary about, he traveled the world speaking to people all over the world. I think the King of Bhutan was one of my favorites. Paul Selig, or maybe he's in the next one. Anyway, people all over the world. Michael Tamura, that's how I met Michael. All these incredible people talking about our intuition and how it serves us. And his next movie that he's working on, his next documentary, is fear. He's exploring fear. Of course, COVID put a stop to him traveling the world, talking to people. But we're going to catch up with Bill and see what's been happening with that. I think that there's not, you know, had COVID not hit, he probably would have got that one out. So it's almost finished. So he was traveling well, talking to people about fear. And he's got a few other things in the pipeline. So I'd be fascinated to catch up with Bill. And Danielle Gibbons is coming back on the show. I had her on the show a couple of years ago. She channels Mother Mary, the mother energy. Beautiful. So we're going to chat to her about world circumstances. And also Sarah, who's another NDE, is coming on the show. Oh, look, there's all sorts of people. I know you love your NDE, so do I. It was hard to get Janine to talk about hers. There's so much more that she didn't say. But anyway, her audience is not my audience. Normally it's a more mainstream audience, more of an Oprah type audience that talk about resilience, and they don't really talk about talking to spirits on the other side. But you know me, I love talking about all that stuff. So yes, remember to get the book Awakened by Death. Lots of great stories in there about talking to spirits on the other side and resilience. Oh, there's a huge rainbow outside. Oh my God, it's as bright as anything. Wow. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? I don't know if you can see it. Love a rainbow. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Love you all. Bye for now. Mwah.